Things kicking off here. We'll turn that down. Let's fire up the YouTubes, and then we'll get started. Welcome everybody to Mastering the Game Episode 1. The entire point of this series is to help you as a Dungeon Master become better at real-time wielding the world that you have made. Knowing the ins and outs and how to shortcut and hotkey your way through Dungeons and Dragons, and helping you become better at making a real-time world as your players live within it. So we'll go ahead and get started, and then we will talk more about how to do that. All right. Okay, first and foremost, let's make sure my mic is working. Yeah, it looks like we're at least broadcasting. Whee! All right. Welcome to the chat. It's me. Is it me or is there a slight echo? There might be, but let's make sure. It might be your headphones, unless there's more than one person experiencing it. Let's make sure we are only picking up audio through one device. It looks like we're good on my end. So perhaps you're watching on multiple devices and it's getting funky. 1 second here. Let's maybe do this. All right. Hopefully that helps. Just the vocals. All right. Let me know if that fixed it, and we can proceed. So, whenever we are home brewing, right, the thought that comes to mind immediately is creating something specific to your world. How can we create things that are specific to your world that are going to fit the moment, right? And that's the entire point here. Is there a reason for you to homebrew? Yeah, the only reason for you to be homebrewing is so that you can specifically cater exactly an aspect or a monster to your world. And so one thing that we can do here is we have to ask ourselves, are we going to build from scratch? Are we going to homebrew from scratch? Or are we just going to retheme, right? And we'll talk a little bit about pros and cons. Just sounds a little robotic. Maybe that sounds like, man, what are you trying to say about my voice? Scratch versus retheme. I'll have to go back and listen to it because everything looks fine on my end here. So maybe I got something funky setting here. Phenomenal cosmic powers. Well, that is kind of the vibe I go for in general, right? Itty bitty living space. Hey, Man of Miniatures, just so you know, your package is in the mail. Man of Miniatures, everyone, they recently won the giveaway for 2 really nice Sable Kolinsky brushes. And so those actually got into the mail just today. But we were talking about scratch versus retheme. And so when we're making a monster from scratch, we have the real problem that we face is the game of balance. In 5th edition, I have found is already difficult enough to balance in, especially if you're kind of a newer dungeon master. It can be tough to really off the cuff just wing something that's going to provide an appropriate amount of balance for your players. And that can be really tough for someone who's new to being a dungeon master. We're going to want something that's a little bit more controllable, that has a better balance already built in, that has a certain amount of someone has already done the work for us, right? Why should we reinvent the wheel when it's already been done? And that is why I would definitely give the balance tick mark to the retheme. Right? If we're looking for something that's going to provide a balanced encounter for our players, we're going to want to be working in that aspect. We want to retheme the monsters that we're facing rather than making things from scratch. Oh, that might be a part of it. All right. So when we're looking for things that are going to fit our theme, you're definitely going to be better off making from scratch, right? You can definitely make exactly what it is you're looking for, and that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, you can still pretty much accomplish that by retheming. And then, of course, when it really boils down to it, I would recommend to anybody who's looking to create a homebrew monster to just retheme something. There's absolutely no point for you to be reinventing the wheel, as I said earlier. So how do we do this? How can we retheme or take a monster and put a different spin on it so that it is applicable to your campaign? For instance, to just mention something, I suppose, you could take an aquatic monster and apply it into your desert setting. What is it that we can do to retheme that to make it so that that is fitting and works? Well, first and foremost, it's all boiling down to what fits the environment, right? So let's actually, I think it'll be easiest to portray how I would retheme something by just whipping something out. Let's grab that monster manual that we had handy, and we'll crack it open. Okay, first thing that pops open here that catches my interest. Sure, why not? An Ettercap. Okay, we have the Ettercap from the monster manual. Humanoid spider thing from the Underdark. Yeah, okay, cool, right? But really, we're not working in the Underdark. What we kind of want from this is the quiet killer aspect. We kind of want the ambusher kind of feel, the vibe, this somewhat spider thing, but a treant with a disembodied hands to make a grabber tree. That's a great one. Things I Know mentioned a really cool retheme that he used to help fit the theme. And so let's take this Ettercap, and rather than being a forest or an underground monster, it would be really easy to turn this into a desert. Think of spiders in the desert and how they're kind of trapdoor monsters and definitely ambushers, and the things that they do. The cactus, the cactus crack and the cactus. Ooh, okay. So let's kind of mess with that. Let's turn our Ettercap into a desert creature. So the first thing that we have to look at is, okay, are we in the right ballpark, right? Our challenge rating for the ye old Ettercap. Let me actually zoom in on this and make it easier for all of us. Down cam properties. Oh boy. Configure. All right. Camera control and wake up. Wake up. And we'll start zooming in here. If my mouse would wake up. Alright, there we go. Oh, someday, somehow, some way. Alright, it doesn't want to zoom in much further than that, but I think that's just enough for us to see just a little bit better here. Okay, yeah, that's good. Just a little bit. Just a little bit better. It's legible now, at least. Okay. So, challenge rating 2. All right, so you're dealing with part of the problem here is we want to perhaps bump that up. We need to bump up those rookie numbers because that's just not going to cut it. Actually, let's slide this over so I have a little bit of writing space. Yes, there we go. If I got real fancy, I'd figure out how to open up a window, but I didn't do that for today. So here is our desert Ettercap. All right, and so this is just an example for anyone hopping in. This is how I would homebrew an Ettercap to fit a different setting. So this Ettercap, the problem is I want this to be kind of the main thing in the main encounter of the evening. So I'm going to pump it up into a CR5 because my party, they're all level 5. So there's definitely going to be some room here. And my rule of thumb whenever you are homebrewing is you need to either increase a die of health, increase a die of damage, or increase the AC by 1 for every CR that we need to increase our creature. So because we've got a disparity of 2 to 5 here, we need to bump up 3 different things, whether it's a movement ability, whether it's extra damage, whether it's extra health. 3 different things about this creature that we're going to need to bump up to help us maintain balance. Hey, Carlos, we're glad that you're here, man. You know what? Chemistry is important, so I'm glad that you got some study in, but I'm glad that you're here now too. So when we're taking a look at homebrewing this monster, that's some things for us to consider. Now, this spider climb is good, right? I've got no problem with the spider climb, but it's really not going to be pertinent in our desert setting unless we specifically put them into maybe like canyon walls or something where they're going to have to face that. So that's a potential thing for us to switch up or change to make it a little bit more pertinent for our setting. The web sense might not be, I would probably give it a tremor sense here actually, because it's a sand, it's now a sand creature. I would just alter this into some sort of tremor sense where it's got like as long as you are touching the ground within 30 feet of it, it can tell where you are, regardless of if it can see you or not, whether you're invisible or not. If you're touching the ground within 30 feet of it, it knows exactly where you are. And then Web Walker is just its ability to move in its local environment. But since we have kind of the ambush, trapdoor spider, desert spider, I think that more of a desert, kind of a desert walk, sand does not count as as difficult terrain, could be useful there. Hey Robin, I'm glad that you stopped in. It's good to have you here. As for actions, we can see that the bite is commonly just 1d8, and that's okay, but we have 1d8 of poison damage that gets tacked onto that. So we're totaling it 2d8, and then there's the teeny little DC 11 Constitution saving throw to be poisoned. And remembering that the poisoned ability is just disadvantage on like ability checks for the next, however long. So, ooh, I like that, Brad. That would be a really good sort of anti-movement, something to tether. So if we don't change its movement specifically, it's a good ability for it to have. And it does have the web, so we'll move this up here. It has the web ability, so rather than like having it be able to web things, let's turn that, rather than a 3 per day, we'll turn that into like a quicksand recharge 5/6 sort of thing to accomplish largely the same effect, right? This way we're retheming, right? We're retheming so that it fits the theme of our environment without having to throw off the balance a lot. And so remember though, when I was talking earlier, there's 3 things that we have to change about this Ettercap to bump it up to CR5, because the common Ettercap is just CR2, and so we need to got to bump up those rookie numbers. And so in order to do that, I think that the best thing to do here is going to be bumping up the damage that it's doing, whether that's bumping up the DC for that Constitution saving throw, because at level 5 your players are probably just going to smoke a DC 11 saving throw. Like they'll just it might as well not exist, especially if you've got some dwarves in your party. There's no point in it being there. Things I know, if anybody wants to look along on their monster manual, the Ettercap is on page 131. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I didn't even, man, you're so good. I didn't even think to like mention that. And actually, so Things I Know just mentioned it, but I think that this is going to be a really important thing to include, is this special ability, is this Web Garrote, which is kind of meh to hit, right? It doesn't really do great damage, but this grapple, the target can't breathe, and then the Ettercap has advantage on those attacks to hit it. So it's not like a normal grapple, because grapples normally just minimize the movement. It just negates movement. You can't move. Your movement speed is now 0. Great, thanks. That really doesn't do much when fighting your players. But giving the Ettercap advantage on the attacks, huge. Huge. And that's for as long as the grapple works. So I would definitely include the Web Garrote in our desert variant Ettercap. So that would be a good, the Garrote is a good one. I think that making that the web here, so instead of the web, we'll probably go with that the quicksand ability that I liked. Brad mentioned a quicksand ability. So we'll probably bump it up to do a little bit of damage too. So it's not just it magically turns things into quicksand. Maybe it like sprays kind of like a quick-crete-esque spray of just kind of this viscous sand that instantly hardens on its prey and slows it down. And I think that would be a really solid variant that we could use. And in order to make that worthwhile, we definitely want to make that AoE. So the web is normally +4 to hit someone specifically, one large or small creature. And so we want our quicksand to be AoE. So maybe we'll turn it into a cone, a 30-foot cone. Yeah, and that's a great way to pump it up. So it's still just web, but rather than one target, we're going to turn it into a 30-foot cone with maybe like a DC 12 dex or something like that, in order to avoid that, which will be really solid. And then I think the third thing to include is going to be spicing up this bite attack. Oh no, I've smeared ink. I've smeared a little bit of my ink on my hand there. My bad. So a common way to increase the intensity, or when I whip things out from scratch. So as you gain more experience, you'll gain the ability to just make things up on the fly, to scratch things. And we need to be doing 20% of the max HP of the highest max HP in the party. What does that mean? That means that if the highest person in the party has a max HP of 100 HP, your average damage output per attack, not per round, per attack, needs to be 20 HP. 4d10 per attack. Why is that? Because there are so many ways in 5th edition for players to negate the damage that is dealt. Whenever we're working with making our homebrew creatures, the biggest thing that we're going to face is we'll get done with the encounter and the players will all look at each other and say, well, was that it? And we don't want to just turn it into a hit point We don't want it to be a boxing bag, a punching bag for your players to just, waylay for 250 HP. That's not fun. Fun things are to include, it has, somehow ensnared you and it's able to deal additional damage because of that. It's slowed you down or turned certain areas of the map into dangerous areas. That could be a fun variant of the quicksand. And oh man, if it hits you, it sucks. Like genuinely, we have to protect the wizard because re-attacks, the wizard's going down like instantly. So it forces your players into the hit point economy or the action economy that is Dungeons and Dragons. Because you as the dungeon master are essentially playing a game with your players. It's a little sub game, a meta game, if you will. Your players have finite resources. Those come in the form of hit points. That's their finite resource. Spells is a finite resource for them. And that essentially boils down to, and then maybe items and resources that they have in addition to that. Those are really the three things that your players have control over. They can control your hit points with using other spells. Oh man, that's one of their other things. And they can boost those spells and hit points with items that could potentially replace the use of spells or replace hit points. And that is the actual mathematical game that is Dungeons and Dragons. And if you are not challenging those three things, that action economy, that hit point economy that exists in Dungeons and Dragons, your players will walk out of a fight and say, oh, well, okay, well, let's just carry on then. And that's how players' bosses get rolled. Oh, how did this happen? They went through the entire dungeon, they showed up to the boss, and they just rolled my boss. Well, that's because they didn't use these things to steal from their players. That's the whole thing. That's what you're doing the entire time. Your objective is to steal that economy from your players. That way, when it gets down to the wire, they have to decide, oh man, do I upcast Guiding Bolt because the radiant damage is going to be super effective? Or do I upcast Cure Wounds because our guy is on his last leg? And that's a great moment for your players to sit there and experience and realize, like, okay, well, I'm gonna Guiding Bolt, and like maybe then I'll be able to like throw a healing potion to the barbarian, and maybe he can bonus action quaff it on his turn, right? And that provides opportunity for great roleplay moments, cinematic moments that become memorable. Because the monster itself, that's fine. That's memorable, I guess. Like, oh, you remember that thing that had that cool move that did this one thing? Said no player ever. What do your players talk about after the fact? They talk about what each of them did. They talk about the cool things that they accomplished fighting that thing. And if your thing is not stealing that economy from your players, then you're not going to accomplish that. I've got a comment here. That's why I like shadows. Those things are deadly at all levels because they sap the strength from the stat of their opponents. That's a great example of a monster that steals from that economy, especially when half the party is doing like strength-based attacks. When you've got high strength party, shadows can be extremely deadly. Tavern Magic, love those moments. The gasps, the bite the nails, those are the moments that you're trying to accomplish. And you can't accomplish that if you're not bringing the pain, if you're not playing smart, right? So this more than anything, the 20% of the max HP of the highest HP in the party, that's what, and it might feel stiff at first, and you have to be judicious how you use that. You can't just go slapping the wizard into the ground in the very first instant, right? That's not that's not going to be fun for your players. It's not going to provide them the opportunity for that. So you have to foreshadow that a little bit. And we do that, though. Perhaps only do this attack once it gets that garrote, and then it has the advantage. That is going to be a great way for your players to realize, like, oh no, like, do not let this thing get a hold of you. And that creates for fun moments as your players suddenly become much more particular about their movement, instead of everybody just standing there in the middle of the room as though nothing can touch them. Because if that Ettercap gets a hold of you, it's going to wreck your life. So that's what we're looking for when we're creating Homebrew Monsters. I'm going to say that unless we have any questions, I'll probably wrap it up for the evening. Here's what I'll do. We're going to do this. Just a reminder for everybody, please come on over to YouTube, like, subscribe, all the things. Don't forget that is where this is primarily being broadcast. So everyone on Instagram, if you're wondering like what I'm pointing at and what I'm talking about, yeah, that's my notes for YouTube in the down camera there. But the point of all of this is to create a fun and memorable moment, and to be able to do this freehand, real time, to do this on the fly is going to provide you serious capabilities as a dungeon master. So with that, unless it's a super OP baddie, then it could thematically lay down crazy OP entering move and then play with its food after that. That's a good one. I like that. And a definite way to set the tone. Very nice. Real quick, woot, YouTube for the win. I'm going to give the outro because things, and then we can hang out and chat for a second. So have fun, and as always, take care of your players. Instagram, thank you so much. Come on over to YouTube, hang out and chat. Love ya. All right. So yeah, I really like the opening move, right? Coming in and like laying down the law, slapping some paint on these guys, and then kind of waffling around. But the problem is we don't want our baddie to feel neutered, right? We don't want our players at any moment to feel like they have plot armor, even if they kind of do. Even if you're like, oh, I don't want to kill them right now, right? Because if they have that plot armor, then they're just going to just surf through the encounter, and there's no investment. We've lost the investment because what does this matter? I'm going to survive this anyways because I have plot armor. We've lost power. We've lost the power of the moment there. Yeah, for real though, because this will be super fun. Maybe we'll have to have you run a game for us when you come. So, but if that's all, hey, I see that only one of you has liked the video so far. Please like it, subscribe. If there's no questions, Carlos, do you have any questions before you get back to chemistry? I appreciate you hopping in. If not, we will go ahead and close up shop for the night. This is going to be this is the first episode in a series of how to be a better dungeon master, how to master the game and really help the game work for you. So the big tool, the big trick in this one, I suppose, is using that 20% of your max HP as a measure, a guideline for how much damage you should be dealing per attack. Don't forget that, per attack. And it will open some eyes and wake people up. And then the second one is boosting things, 1 or 2 or 3 things per CR that we're trying to move things. So if we've got something in the book that's like CR 9 and we're like, oh man, but my party is CR 6 or is level 6, we need to remove 3 things, right? And then on top of that, if you have for every player more, so if you have 4 players, these numbers work. This is for 4 players. That's the balance here. But if you have 5 or 6 players, you need to go a CR 1 or 2 higher per extra player. So let me make sure that we've got that. If we have 4 level 5 adventurers, CR5 is a nice balanced medium encounter. That's it. Boom. If we are 6 level 5 adventurers, we need to be in the ballpark of 8 or higher, depending upon the synergy of the party, right? And that's standard. That's standard balancing in 5th edition. I don't know the maths. I never bothered to figure out like how to actually CR things that I make up from scratch. But this is it's a super solid rule of thumb to go by. If you go by that, you're not going to just outrightly kill your players and be like, sorry for the TPK, guys. TPKs might happen because you were good about that action economy. You were able to steal HP and spells from them earlier in the encounter, and then they're going in on empty into a boss fight. You might have some problems, something to consider, right? If you steal too much from them too early, they'll go into a boss fight and just get totally wrecked. So, item of note. Ooh, okay, that's a good question. How do you calculate NPCs in the party? So, when I'm calculating, I actually don't. I actually do not bother calculating NPCs for like actually being beneficial or helpful. Here's the reason why. I ensure that I roleplay NPCs realistically. If they're super heroic and all the things, what on earth are they doing with your party? They should be off running their own adventures. Your players should have followers and not necessarily NPC heroes going along with them, because we don't want to create Dungeon Master player characters. That's just more work for us. We don't need that. We're literally running the rest of the world. We don't need to make a Dungeon Master player character. Make a follower. I recommend Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers book. Absolute gold. MCDM. He's Matt Colville on YouTube. He has an entire Running the Game series on YouTube. Genuine gold. But his follower system, I use a variant of it when I need to. But I use a followers system, meaning that there is a subordinate NPC that essentially I give to one of my players and say, hey, run your guy. And let them explore that relationship. And it's fun and easy and a good way to shore up shortcomings in the party. Brad, crazy math. Maybe Carlos can help us with the math since once he's done studying for chemistry. I like it. And Raymer, Edward, I roll basic stats for NPCs that are going to join the party. Yeah, and you can use that. I personally never make characters for NPCs. Actually, you know what? Forgive me for stepping out of frame for a moment, but let me just go grab one of my my NPC cards, my follower cards. And this is exactly what I give the players who acquire a follower. And you'll notice, if you're familiar with Matt Colville's followers, you'll see some similarities, but there's some things that I've just done myself. So let me actually grab that in just a moment. All right. So, if we'll take a look at the down camera, here we have a NPC card for Athelstan the Brave, my man. And so this is just kind of a general format that I whipped up in like PowerPoint, I think. The NPCs that I give them health levels. I'll probably hand them a follower at level 5. Okay, so you can see the number of health levels they have at level 5. So they would have 4 health levels. Okay, they have this ability, Second Wind, that unlocks at their level 4, and you can use that to regain 3 health levels. Here's how I handle the NPC stats. They get 2 things that they get saves at. They get 2 things that they are skilled in. That's it. I'm not running anything else. Is a flat roll from an NPC. The whole point here is for your players to be the heroes. This guy right here, he's just a follower. He's a meat sack that provides jokes and occasional guidance, right? As they get higher up, I have some cool abilities for them to get. At level 7, they get a +2 to their initiative, or they get a +3 to wisdom saves. So they get various abilities. You can give them whatever weapon you want to give them, or whatever special equipment you want them to mule around for you. You can give them whatever armor you need them to have. And that's it. That's everything that your NPC follower needs to be accomplishing. And that's how I run NPC followers. Maybe I'll do a special video sometime specifically about the NPC follower. But yeah, that's how I handle that. A lot of my players recently haven't even seen NPC followers because I have so many players at the table that it's just it's not been something that I've needed to do. But I developed a lot of this while I was in Afghanistan, and occasionally I'd be running D&D for like 2 guys, and so I'd give them each a follower, and we would just go for it. And they got to run essentially D&D for 2, and they had their little follower, their little NPC follower, and we played D&D and had a great time. And it worked out. It worked perfect, and it provided them just enough to meat shield without taking too much from the players. So awesome, you guys. I think I'm going to go ahead and close it out for the night. Looks like our chat has slowed down. So once again, thank you so much for hanging out. We'll catch you next week for the next episode of Mastering the Game. And if that is everything, have fun. And as always, take care of your players.